I never questioned why my mother cried after every wedding. I thought it was joy, watching another couple begin their fairy tale. I was wrong about a lot of things. My name is Maya Chen, and I've been surrounded by white dresses and fresh flowers my entire life. My mother Victoria built Charleston's most exclusive wedding planning business from absolutely nothing. Chen Weddings has orchestrated over 300 ceremonies in the past 15 years, each one more elaborate than the last. Magnolia plantations, historic mansions, beachfront resorts. If Charleston's elite are getting married, my mother is making it happen. Growing up in this world meant I learned early that love was a business. Not in a cynical way, but in the most beautiful sense possible. Love deserved perfect execution. Every detail mattered because this was someone's forever beginning. Victoria taught me that marriages might face challenges, but wedding days should be flawless. That became our mission. I'm 22 now, finishing my marketing degree at College of Charleston while working as mom's assistant. I know every florist in the city, every caterer worth hiring, every venue that won't embarrass the family name. I can spot a problematic mother-in-law from across a ballroom and diplomatically handle vendor disasters that would send other planners into nervous breakdowns. People always ask if I want to take over the business. The honest answer is I'm not sure. I love the work, but something about it feels incomplete to me. Maybe it's because I've never been in love myself. Not real love, anyway. I date Jake Morrison, a sweet accounting major who brings me coffee and never forgets important dates. He's exactly the kind of man my mother approves of, stable, responsible, from a good family. But when I watch our brides walking down the aisle glowing with happiness, I wonder if what I feel for Jake is enough. There's no glow, no overwhelming joy, just comfort and compatibility. The Hartwell wedding changed everything. Thomas and Sophia Hartwell booked us 8 months ago. Thomas comes from one of Charleston's oldest banking families, the kind of old money that built this city. Sophia teaches kindergarten at a private school downtown. She's genuine and sweet, the type of person who sends handwritten thank you notes and remembers everyone's birthdays. Their engagement story is charming time they met at a charity fundraiser where Sophia was volunteering with face painting for children. From our first meeting, I could tell this wedding meant everything to Sophia. She'd been planning it in her head since childhood, keeping Pinterest boards and magazine clippings for years. She wanted something elegant but not ostentatious, romantic but not overly sentimental. Garden roses, string quartet ceremony, music, reception under the stars at Boone Hall Plantation, classic Charleston elegance. Thomas seemed less engaged in the planning process, which isn't unusual for grooms. He'd nod agreeably at Sophia's suggestions and deferred to her preferences on most details. He was polite during our meetings, occasionally charming, but I noticed he checked his phone frequently and seemed eager to conclude our discussions. Again, not uncommon. Many grooms view wedding planning as something they endure rather than enjoy. What struck me as odd was how attentive my mother became around Thomas. Victoria has always been professional with our clients, but she began taking on more of the direct communication with the Hartwells personally. Usually, I handle vendor coordination and timeline logistics, while she focuses on the bigger picture. But with this wedding, she inserted herself into every small decision. She started working longer hours, taking calls at unusual times, and making frequent site visits to Boone Hall that seemed excessive for a venue we'd used dozens of times before. When I offered to handle some of these tasks, she'd insist they required her personal attention. She was particular about which vendor meetings she attended, always making sure to be present when Thomas would be there, often suggesting Sophia didn't need to come to every discussion about technical details. The first real warning sign came 6 weeks before the wedding. I was at the office late, organizing final headcount confirmations, when Victoria's phone rang. She left it on her desk while meeting with our florist in the back room. The caller ID showed Thomas H. I shouldn't have answered, but we were expecting confirmation about guest dietary restrictions, and I thought it might be important. When I picked up, Thomas's voice was soft, intimate. Victoria, I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. There had to be an explanation. Maybe they'd had a business dinner to discuss final arrangements. Maybe he was referring to a venue walkthrough. But the tone of his voice, the familiarity in it, suggested something else entirely. I decided not to mention it to my mother. I told myself I was overthinking, reading too much into a brief conversation taken out of context. But I started paying closer attention. Victoria began carrying her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. She started wearing perfume to client meetings, something she'd never done before. Her work clothes became more stylish, more deliberately attractive. She scheduled appointments at times when I wouldn't be in the office, claiming she was giving me opportunities to focus on my studies. 2 weeks later, I saw her car parked outside the Marriott downtown on a Thursday afternoon. This was strange because we had no events booked there and she told me she was having a vendor lunch across town. I circled the block twice, convincing myself there was a reasonable explanation, before finally going inside. The lobby was nearly empty except for a few business travelers. I spotted Victoria immediately, sitting in a corner booth of the hotel bar. She wasn't alone. Thomas Hartwell sat across from her, leaning forward, his hand covering hers on the table. They were talking quietly, intensely, like lovers sharing secrets. I ducked behind a pillar, my heart racing. This couldn't be what it looked like. There had to be some explanation. Maybe Thomas was having cold feet about the wedding and needed counseling. Maybe there was a family crisis requiring delicate handling. Maybe Sophia had asked my mother to speak with him privately about something. But then Thomas lifted Victoria's hand to his lips and kissed her palm. She smiled in a way I'd never seen before. Soft, vulnerable, completely different from her professional demeanor. When he stood to leave, they embraced, and it wasn't the polite hug of business associates. His hands lingered on her waist. She straightened his tie with casual intimacy. I left before they could see me, driving home in a daze. Everything I thought I knew about my mother, about our business, about the weddings we'd created together, suddenly felt uncertain. Victoria had always been my role model, and she, strong, independent, dedicated to creating perfect moments for other people. The idea that she might be having an affair with a client, especially one about to marry someone else, was impossible to reconcile with the woman who'd raised me. That evening at dinner, I studied her face for signs of guilt or deception. She seemed normal, asking about my classes and updating me on details for 3 upcoming weddings. When I mentioned the Hartwell wedding, she showed no unusual reaction, discussing the final menu tasting and confirming the musician's arrival time with her typical attention to detail. But I noticed small things I'd previously overlooked. The way she smiled when Thomas's name came up, the careful attention she paid to her appearance on days when she'd be seeing him. The slight flush in her cheeks when she talked about visiting Boone Hall to check the garden setup. I started following her. I'm not proud of this, but I needed to understand what was happening. 3 times over the next week, Victoria met Thomas at different locations around Charleston. A wine bar in the French Quarter. A small restaurant on King Street. The gardens at Middleton Plantation during public hours when they could walk among other visitors without attracting attention. Each time, I watched from a distance as they behaved like a couple. Holding hands, sharing food, stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. The worst part was seeing how happy my mother looked. She laughed more with Thomas than I'd seen her laugh in years. Her face lit up when she saw him approaching. She looked 10 years younger, glowing with the kind of joy I'd only seen on our brides' faces. Meanwhile, Sophia continued planning her dream wedding with innocent enthusiasm. She'd stop by her office with fabric swatches and magazine clippings, excited about every small detail. She brought us cookies she'd baked and asked for our opinions on everything from napkin folds to reception playlist songs. She trusted us completely, often saying how grateful she was to have found wedding planners who truly cared about her happiness. The guilt was eating me alive. Every time Sophia smiled at me, every time she excitedly described her honeymoon plans or talked about the future she and Thomas would build together, I felt complicit in what was happening. But I still didn't know how to confront my mother or what to do with what I'd discovered. The breaking point came 1 week before the wedding. I was delivering final headcount numbers to the caterer when I decided to stop by Boone Hall to check on the ceremony setup. The plantation was closed to tourists that afternoon, giving us exclusive access to prepare the gardens. I expected to find our usual crew arranging chairs and testing sound equipment. Instead, I found my mother and Thomas alone in the garden where the ceremony would take place, wrapped in each other's arms among the roses and magnolia trees where Sophia would walk down the aisle in 7 days. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't hear me approach. I heard Thomas telling my mother how beautiful she was, how much these weeks had meant to him, how he wished things could be different. My mother was crying, but not from sadness. She looked radiant, transformed by whatever she was feeling. I know this has to end, Thomas was saying, stroking her hair. After Saturday, everything changes, but these months with you have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, Victoria whispered back. I just wish. That's when they saw me standing there, frozen in shock and horror. The color drained from both their faces. Victoria immediately stepped away from Thomas, smoothing her clothes and trying to compose herself. But there was no explaining away what I'd witnessed. Maya, my mother said, her voice shaking. It's not what you think. But it was exactly what I thought, and we all knew it. Thomas excused himself awkwardly, mumbling about needing to pick up his tuxedo. After he left, my mother and I stood alone in the garden where she'd created hundreds of perfect wedding ceremonies, surrounded by the flowers and decorations that would celebrate his marriage to another woman. "How long?" I asked. Victoria sat down heavily on one of the white chairs arranged for Saturday's guests. 3 months, she admitted. It started during the menu tasting. Sophia had food poisoning and couldn't come, so Thomas and I went alone. We got to talking, really talking, and she trailed off, unable to finish. "And you decided to destroy his marriage before it even began? It's not that simple, Maya. You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me. Explain how you could do this to Sophia. She trusts us. She believes in love because of the weddings we create. And I couldn't even say the words." Victoria looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Do you know why Thomas is marrying Sophia?" "Because he loves her," I said, though even as I spoke the words, I realized I'd never seen evidence of that love. "His family arranged this marriage. Sophia comes from money. Not old Charleston money like the Hartwells, but new tech money from her father's software company. The families have been planning this union for business reasons since Thomas and Sophia were teenagers. They've known each other their whole lives, but he's never loved her. Not really." I stared at my mother in disbelief. "That doesn't justify what you're doing, doesn't it?" Victoria stood up, her composure returning. Should Thomas spend his life in a loveless marriage just to satisfy family expectations? Should I deny myself happiness because society says it's wrong? What about Sophia's happiness? What about her choice in this? Sophia will be fine. She'll have security, status, a comfortable life. She'll never know what she's missing because she's never experienced real passion. Sometimes ignorance is kinder than truth. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the woman who'd raised me, who taught me that love was sacred and marriage was a commitment to be honored. This was someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd rationalized betrayal as mercy. "How many others have there been?" I asked quietly. My mother's face went pale. "What do you mean? This isn't your first affair with the groom, is it?" The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of unspoken truth. Finally, Victoria sank back into the chair, all pretense gone. 7, she whispered, including Thomas. Over the past 15 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. 7 grooms. 7 weddings we'd planned together while my mother conducted secret relationships with men about to marry other women. 7 brides who'd trusted us with their most important day while we betrayed them in the worst possible way. "How?" I managed to ask. "It's not what you think," Victoria said quickly. "I never seduced anyone. These men approached me. During the planning process, they'd confide their doubts, their fears about marrying for family expectations rather than love. I listened, I comforted them, and sometimes it became more, you could have referred them to counselors, you could have encouraged them to be honest with their fiancés, and destroy families, ruin business relationships. These people live in a different world, Maya. Marriage isn't about love for them, it's about mergers, alliances, continuing family legacies. The men I've been with were trapped in arrangements they never chose. So you gave them affairs to make those arrangements more tolerable?" Victoria winced. "I gave them moments of genuine connection before they resigned themselves to lives of duty and obligation. I thought about all the weddings we planned together, all the ceremonies where I'd watch these men marry women they apparently didn't love while having secret relationships with my mother. The realization made me physically ill. 'The Ashford wedding,' I said, remembering a lavish ceremony 2 years ago. That's why you insisted on handling all the groom's family communications personally." Victoria nodded reluctantly. "And the Patterson wedding last spring. You took that mysterious long weekend, right before the ceremony." Another nod. I started connecting dots I'd previously ignored. Victoria's unexplained absences, her insistence on personal involvement with certain clients, the way she sometimes seemed melancholy after particularly beautiful ceremonies. She hadn't been crying from joy at those weddings. She'd been crying because she was watching men she'd been intimate with marry other women. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. "No one. These men have as much to lose as I do. More, actually. Their families, their social standing, their business relationships. Everything depends on maintaining these arranged marriages." "What happens after the weddings?" "It ends," Victoria said simply. "Clean breaks. No contact. They go on with their lives, and I plan the next event." I thought about Thomas, about the genuine affection I'd seen between him and my mother. But you're in love with Thomas. Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. She put her face in her hands and sobbed. Yes, she admitted. This time is different. This time I fell in love. The full tragedy of the situation settled over me. My mother had spent 15 years having meaningless affairs with men, using her for emotional comfort before entering loveless marriages. But with Thomas, she'd found real feeling, real connection, and he was still going to marry Sophia in 7 days. What are you going to do? I asked. What I always do. Watch him marry someone else, and then disappear from his life forever. And Sophia? She deserves to know what kind of man she's marrying. Sophia will have a good life. Thomas will be faithful after the wedding. They always are. The guilt ensures that. She'll never know what she missed, and she'll be happier for that ignorance. I stared at my mother, this woman who'd shaped my entire understanding of love and marriage, and realized I didn't know her at all. Everything I'd believed about her dedication to creating perfect weddings was a lie. She wasn't celebrating love, she was facilitating deception on a massive scale. I need time to think, I told her. Maya, please. I know this is shocking, but you have to understand. I don't understand anything anymore, I interrupted. I need to go home. I left her sitting in the garden among the wedding decorations, surrounded by the flowers and chairs that would soon celebrate another elaborate lie. The drive home was a blur. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, our business, it was all built on deception. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sophia, so excited about marrying a man who'd spent months having an affair with our wedding planner. I thought about all the other brides we'd worked with, wondering which of their grooms had betrayed them before they even said their vows. But I also thought about my mother's words. Was there truth in what she'd said about arranged marriages and trapped grooms? Did these men deserve compassion for being forced into loveless unions? Was there a moral difference between affairs that ended marriages and affairs that made bad marriages bearable? The questions kept me awake until dawn, and I was no closer to answers when morning came. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, mild temperature, gentle breeze, ideal conditions for Sophia's dream wedding. I arrived at Boone Hall early to oversee final preparations, still unsure what I was going to do about what I knew. My mother was already there, directing vendors with her usual competent efficiency. She looked tired but composed, every inch the professional wedding planner. If I hadn't witnessed the scene in the garden 3 days earlier, I would never have suspected the emotional turmoil beneath her calm exterior. Sophia arrived with her bridesmaids 2 hours before the ceremony, glowing with happiness. She hugged me tightly, thanking us for making her dream wedding possible. Her joy was so genuine, so pure, that I felt physically sick knowing what I knew about her groom. I can't believe this day is finally here, she said, spinning around in her getting ready robe. I've been dreaming about this since I was 5 years old. Her bridesmaids helped her into the dress, a stunning creation of silk and French lace that made her look like a fairy tale princess. As I watched her transformation, I realized she truly believed she was marrying the love of her life. The happiness radiating from her was the real thing, even if Thomas's feelings weren't reciprocated. Meanwhile, Thomas was getting ready in the plantation's main house with his groomsmen. I walked over to deliver his boutonniere and coordinate timeline details. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but pale and tense. When our eyes met, I saw guilt and resignation rather than joy. Beautiful day for a wedding, I said carefully. Yes, he agreed, but his voice was hollow. Sophia must be happy. She's radiant. Thomas nodded, adjusting his bow tie with shaking hands. Good, she deserves to be happy. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock. I watched from the back as Sophia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her face luminous with love and hope. Thomas stood at the altar, looking appropriately groom-like, but I could see the effort it cost him to maintain the facade. The minister spoke about love as the foundation of marriage, about commitment and faithfulness, and building a life together based on trust. Every word felt like a knife, knowing what I knew about the groom's recent activities. When Thomas said "I do," his voice was steady but his eyes were distant. When Sophia said the same words, her voice rang with conviction and joy. The contrast was heartbreaking. I looked for my mother in the crowd and found her standing behind the photographer, tears streaming down her face as she watched the man she loved marry someone else. Her professionalism kept her functioning, but her heart was breaking in plain sight. The reception was everything Sophia had dreamed of. Elegant, romantic, perfect in every detail. The band played beautifully, the food was exceptional, and the guests danced under strings of lights that turned the plantation gardens into something magical. I watched Thomas and Sophia share their first dance as husband and wife. She looked up at him with such love and trust, while he held her with careful tenderness, the kindness of someone trying to do right by a person they cared about but didn't love. During the cake cutting, Sophia pulled me aside for a private moment. Maya, I want you to know how much this day has meant to me. Your mother is incredible. She made everything perfect. I know Thomas and I will remember this forever. Her gratitude was genuine and heartfelt, which made my knowledge even more painful to bear. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, I found myself alone with my mother during cleanup. We worked in silence, packing up decorations and coordinating vendor departures. The efficiency that had made us such a good team felt different now, mechanical rather than collaborative. Finally, when most of the work was done, Victoria approached me. "We need to talk," she said quietly. We walked to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the remaining vendors and staff. "I'm ending it," she said, without preamble. With Thomas, I mean. "After tonight, I'll never see him again, except for the final invoice meeting, which you can handle. What about your other clients?" "There won't be others." Today showed me how wrong this has all been. Watching Sophia's happiness, seeing Thomas's misery, knowing I contributed to this deception, I can't do it anymore. I studied her face in the dim light from the reception tent. She looked older than her 52 years, worn down by years of complicated secrets. "Why did you start?" I asked. "The affairs, I mean. What made you think it was okay?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Your father left us when you were 5. Do you remember what I told you about why he went away? You said he wasn't ready for the responsibility of family life, that he needed to find himself." "That was a lie," Victoria said. "The truth is, I drove him away. He wanted more children, wanted us to move to a smaller city where life would be less expensive and stressful. He wanted me to give up the business I was just starting and focus on being a wife and mother. This was completely different from the story I'd grown up believing. Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because I didn't want you to blame me for breaking up our family, but I couldn't give up my dreams, and he couldn't accept that. So he left, and I spent years convinced that marriage was about compromise and sacrifice and settling for less than what you really wanted. I began to understand the twisted logic that had led to her affairs. So when you met these grooms who were marrying for family expectations, I saw your father, men who were giving up their dreams for duty and obligation, and I thought maybe I could give them a little happiness before they resign themselves to lives they didn't choose. But you were taking that choice away from their brides. These women deserve to know what kind of marriages they were entering." "Did they?" Victoria asked. "Would Sophia have been happier knowing that Thomas doesn't love her the way she loves him? Would she have chosen differently? Or would she have married him anyway and spent her life trying to earn the love he can't give her?" These were the questions that had kept me awake for 3 nights. I didn't have answers, only more confusion about right and wrong in situations where all the choices seemed to cause pain. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you." Victoria said, "You could expose everything. Go to Sophia. Tell her about Thomas's affair. Tell the other wives about their husbands. Destroy multiple families and marriages. Or you could understand that sometimes the kindest thing is to let people keep their illusions. These marriages aren't built on passionate love, but they can still provide companionship, security, and respect. The women are cared for, even if they're not adored. Is that so terrible?" I thought about Jake, my safe and comfortable boyfriend, who would never break my heart because he'd never inspire the kind of passion that could break it. Was my relationship with him really different from Sophia's with Thomas? Were we all just settling for different versions of safety rather than risking everything for love? "I need time to decide," I told her. "I understand. But Maya, whatever you choose, I want you to know that I love you. Everything I've done, right or wrong, has been to build something I could leave to you. This business, our reputation, our financial security, it's all been for your future. Even the affairs, even these men pay premium rates for absolute discretion. Their guilt makes them generous clients. The money from those weddings funded your education, our beautiful office, the down payment on our house. I'm not proud of how I earned it, but I'm not ashamed of what I built with it either." I stared at her, realizing that even my college tuition had been paid with money from her deception. Everything in my life was connected to these lies. We finished cleaning up in silence. The plantation looked peaceful again, as if the elaborate celebration had never happened. By tomorrow, Sophia and Thomas would be on their honeymoon, beginning their new life together, based on a foundation I now knew was cracked. The next morning, I made my decision. I called Sophia and told her I needed to see her before she left for her honeymoon. We met at a coffee shop downtown. where she was glowing with newlywed happiness and eager to thank me again for the perfect wedding. "Sophia," I said, "there's something you need to know about Thomas." Her face immediately grew concerned. "Is he okay? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The affair, the other grooms, the pattern of deception that had characterized my mother's business for 15 years. I watched her face transform from confusion to shock to heartbreak as the truth sank in. When I finished, Sophia sat in stunned silence for a long time. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Did he love her?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I admitted. "I think he did." "More than he loves me?" I couldn't lie to her. "Yes." Sophia nodded slowly, as if she'd suspected this truth, even if she hadn't acknowledged it. "What should I do?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "That's your decision to make." "Why are you telling me this? You could have kept quiet, let me live in ignorance." "Because you deserve the truth. You deserve to choose your life based on real information, not lies." Sophia left the coffee shop without saying goodbye. 3 hours later, she called me from the airport. "I'm not going on the honeymoon," she said. "I told Thomas I know about the affair. He didn't deny it." "What did he say?" "That he was sorry, that he never meant to hurt me, that he'd be faithful from now on if I'd give him a chance." And I told him that wasn't enough. I deserve someone who chooses me, not someone who settles for me out of duty. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that Sophia would have the chance to find real love. Sadness that another wedding we'd planned had ended in heartbreak. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I will be," Sophia said. "Thank you for telling me the truth. It was the right thing to do." After she hung up, I called my mother to tell her what I'd done. Victoria was quiet for a long time. "I expected this," she finally said. "It's what your father would have done too. He always chose truth over comfort." "Are you angry?" "No," she said, surprising me. "I'm proud of you. You have integrity I lost somewhere along the way." The aftermath was complicated. Sophia's family demanded refunds and threatened legal action. Thomas's family blamed us for the marriage breakdown, claiming we'd failed in our duty to ensure the wedding's success. Word spread through Charleston's social circles that Chen weddings couldn't be trusted with sensitive family matters. We lost 6 bookings in the following month. Our reputation, built over 15 years of creating perfect weddings, was damaged perhaps beyond repair. But something unexpected happened too. 3 other wives from previous weddings contacted us privately. They'd heard rumors about what happened with the Hartwells and wanted to know if their own marriages had been compromised. 2 learned their husbands had affairs with my mother during their engagement periods. The 3rd discovered her husband had tried to seduce Victoria but been rebuffed. All 3 marriages ended in divorce. Victoria was devastated by the destruction she'd caused. She sold the business to our former assistant and moved to Asheville, where she's working as a freelance event coordinator for small, informal celebrations. She says she's finding peace in creating simple, honest moments instead of elaborate productions built on secrets. I kept Jake for another 6 months after the Hartwell wedding, trying to decide if comfortable companionship was enough for me. It wasn't. I broke up with him gently, explaining that I needed to discover what real love felt like before settling for safety. He was hurt, but understanding, admitting he'd sometimes wondered if we were settling for each other. I'm 23 now, working at a nonprofit that helps victims of domestic violence rebuild their lives. It's meaningful work that feels honest in a way wedding planning never did. I'm single, focused on figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by other people's expectations or my family's secrets. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent. Would Sophia and Thomas have found happiness together eventually? Would ignorance have been kinder than truth? Would the other marriages have survived if the wives hadn't learned about their husbands' betrayals? But then I remember Sophia's face when she thanked me for telling her the truth. She deserved the chance to choose her life based on reality, not illusion. She deserved someone who would love her completely, not someone who would be faithful out of guilt and obligation. 6 months ago, Sophia sent me a wedding invitation. She's marrying a fellow teacher she met at a conference, a man who lights up when he talks about her. The ceremony will be small and simple, at a community center with decorations they're making themselves. She asked if I'd attend as a guest, not as a vendor. I plan to go. Not because I miss the wedding industry, but because I want to witness what real love looks like when it's freely chosen rather than arranged or settled for. Victoria was wrong about one thing. Sometimes the truth is kinder than lies, even when it hurts. Sophia's pain was temporary, but her freedom to find authentic love will last forever. I learned that love isn't about creating perfect moments or maintaining comfortable arrangements. It's about choosing someone again and again, even when the choice is difficult. It's about truth, even when truth is painful. My mother spent 15 years facilitating beautiful lies. I spent one day choosing ugly truth. I still believe I made the right choice, even though it cost us everything we'd built together. Some gifts aren't meant to last forever. Sometimes the greatest gift is letting someone discover they deserve better than what they've accepted. Sophia deserved better. All those wives deserved better. And maybe I deserve better too. Not the safety of settling, but the risk and reward of waiting for love that chooses me as completely as I choose it. That's the real lesson I learned from a lifetime of perfect weddings built on imperfect foundations. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the altar when you realize the love you're promising isn't the love you deserve. The truth might destroy the fairy tale, but it also creates the possibility for something real.